Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and coach. You are on the Steady Coach, and today we're going to be talking about how to deal with unavoidable stress, how to prevent it from interfering with your chronic dizziness recovery, and how to prevent it from making your chronic dizziness symptoms worse. Why are we talking about stress? Well, if you're not new to this channel, you have a pretty good idea that stress is involved in the chronic dizziness process. Quick review here of the chronic dizziness cycle. When someone has chronic dizziness symptoms start, whether that's from an obvious biological cause like tissue damage in the inner ear, or a less obvious cause like an onset of a panic attack, what ends up keeping chronic dizziness symptoms going is not the original cause, but rather a cycle of fear, anxiety, and stressors that cause the nervous system to overreact to the chronic dizziness symptoms themselves and to other sources of potential threat in the person's environment. When this happens, the brain starts to predict threat from triggers of dizziness and from the symptoms themselves. And this threat prediction cycle ends up keeping chronic dizziness symptoms going. I have whole videos that explain this in more detail. I will link to the basics of neural circuit dizziness video below. If you have not seen that, I highly recommend you pause this video here and watch that first. It's obvious that stress feeds into this chronic dizziness cycle. Your threat response system is often driven by stress. Since the threat response system is responsible for this entire chronic dizziness cycle, we really want to be aware of what stressors are in your life, either ones that have been directly affecting you now or ones in the past that have been unresolved, because those can feed into that threat response system that keep chronic dizziness symptoms going. Now, all sorts of stress can influence the threat response system. And the metaphor that I like to use to describe this is the stress bucket. The stress bucket contains all the different sources of stress in your life. And when it's full, your brain goes into this threat response mode that ends up leading to chronic dizziness and other symptoms. So one of the goals of chronic dizziness recovery is to manage the stress in the stress bucket. In other words, to make sure that the stress isn't overflowing out of the bucket, because then the threat response system isn't going to be active, and we break the cycle that's leading to chronic dizziness symptoms. And all kinds of stress go in this bucket. Big ones like I lost a loved one, I just got married, I moved to a new house, I lost my job. Small ones like there was a change in weather, or I spent some time worrying about how I'm going to interact with a particular person. And also more global issues, like those of you who are worried about political issues, the environment, immigration, and so on. These stressors all go into the stress bucket as well. So one of the common questions I get is, Yonit, many of these stressors are totally unavoidable. I can't change the political environment. I can't change it if I'm having some kind of really difficult experience with a sick family member. I can't change it if I'm actually worried about losing my job. I can't change it if I have to take care of young kids. Does this mean that I'm doomed to chronic dizziness? And the answer, of course, is no. You have so much agency in how these various stressors inside your bucket affect you. And in this video, we're going to talk about just that. How to deal with these stressors in a different way so that they're not overflowing your bucket, with full recognition that some of these stressors can't go anywhere. So the way I see it, if we're trying to prevent your stress bucket from overflowing, we have two options. We can either make your stress bucket bigger, or we can take stuff out of your bucket. For the first option, making the stress bucket bigger, these are practices related to your lifestyle, making sure you're getting enough sleep, making sure you're exercising if that's in the cards right now with your symptoms, making sure you're getting sunlight, making sure you have a consistent routine, making sure you are getting socially engaged so you're getting safety from people around you. All of these things make your stress bucket bigger. In other words, all of these things are things that increase your resilience to stress. They will make your bucket bigger so that you have more space in your system to deal with the various other stressors in your life. But let's just say that you've optimized as many lifestyle factors as you can, or you're so anxious that worrying about lifestyle factors actually leads you to more stress. What do we do then? Well, in that case, we need to change how you are dealing with the stress on the inside. Again, this video is about unavoidable stressors that you may not be able to change on the outside, but the way that you deal with them inside has a huge effect on how much space they take up inside your stress bucket. Here's an example. Let's just say that you're really worried about a particular political issue that you don't have a lot of control over right now. If you're constantly worrying about it, thinking about it, feeling helpless about it, feeling hopeless about it, that stressor, even though you have no control over it, is going to take up a ton of room inside your stress bucket. If, on the other hand, the same political issue exists and you're not spending all day long thinking about it or worrying about it, and you feel a sense of agency in the small steps that you're taking to actually make a difference in this political issue, it's going to take up a lot less space in your bucket. Now let's take another example. Let's say that you're dealing with a situation in which you're receiving some hostility from other people. Maybe that has something to do with your political beliefs or your background, or maybe you just don't get along with the other people at your job, or there's just some ongoing conflict in your family. In this case, it's not just about mental energy that you're investing in this particular issue. It's also about how you're responding emotionally to the issue when it comes up. One of the things that I like to say is things hurt a lot more when they have somewhere to land. In other words, when people are being hostile toward you, it's always going to hurt, but the amount it hurts is going to be directly proportional to how much of your own weak points, pain points, and wounds that hostility is touching on. This is why I advocate so much on my channel and in my work in general for doing emotional work rather than just changing our mindsets, because the way outside stress affects you is directly affected by how you've learned through your lifetime to respond and react to that stressor. So now I'm going to outline a general process for how to work with these stressors in a way that shrinks their influence in your stress bucket. Now, the skills I'm going to describe here are going to take some practice. So if you try this right now and you don't feel like you get very far, that's totally normal. This is going to be something you're going to have to start working on. And to that end, before we even get to the process, you're going to want to jot down right now a list of the stressors in your life that you think are filling up your stress bucket. The things that feel really big, maybe the things that feel more medium size, and the things that feel small. It's going to be easiest to do this process if you choose one thing at a time. And after I outline the process, I'll give an example or two of how to do this. And one more thing, stress is not a bad thing. This is a really important reframe for you to have before we even start. Stress just means that your mind and body need to respond to something. I like to think of it as action mode. Stress only becomes threat mode when your brain perceives it as threat. So if your brain perceives a current stressor as less threatening, that's right, it shrinks in size in your bucket. Okay, so step number one is cognitive. It's realizing or thinking about the fact that as big as this stressor feels right now, in the present moment, no matter how uncomfortable or worried you are not actually in danger. You are safe right now in this moment. I'm not talking about 5 seconds, 5 days, or 5 years from now. I'm aware that some of these stressors feel really big and have real life impacts on you. But step one is to realize that in the present moment, you are actually safe, and that the narrative that your brain is creating around the stress is what's making you feel not safe right now. Speaking of the narrative, that's step two. You want to start to separate the story, the narrative around what this stressor means, the what ifs, the catastrophizing, the projection into the future from your present moment experience right here, right now. And we're not here to judge whether that stressor is true or not true or will happen or won't happen. We're not making any judgments about that. I know, you know, that some of these stressors are very real possibilities. We're not here to judge the statistical likelihood. We're just here to notice that all of that exists in the future, and right now in the present, you're having a reaction that is based on a projection, a narrative, a story that may or may not be true. Step number 3 is to be with, name, attune to your present moment experience. Allow yourself to process whatever emotions, feelings, sensations are coming up that were brought on by this stressor. You may notice fear and anxiety and grief and shame and sadness. Be with those things, say those things out loud, allow them to be here. And I like to encourage people to say this out loud. I allow the fear. I allow the shame. And what you're gonna notice as you try to do this is that your brain is going to try to pull you again into the future and into the story and into all the awful things that could happen. And again, I want you to separate yourself from the narrative and the potential possibilities and come back to what's happening in your body, in your experience right now. We're doing this because this is regulating your nervous system. We are bringing your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that does critical thinking and planning, we're bringing that back online, because endlessly worrying and obsessing about something means that part of the brain is not working, and it's going to make it impossible for you to deal with the stressor in a constructive or productive way. And you're going to stay here with these feelings as long as it takes for you to start to feel a little more space. And I know that's kind of an abstract term, but what I mean by this is you'll probably notice feeling like there are more possibilities than just that scary one that you first imagined. You might start to notice that there are other options. You might start to notice the world around you a little bit more. You might start to notice a sense of calm in your body. Again, all of these things are just signs that your system is regulating. And you don't have to get this just right. When you try to do the next step, step 4, if it's working, it's a good sign that you have regulated enough to bring those parts of the brain online that are going to help you problem solve and work through this stressor constructively. Step 4 is when you ask, how would I like to respond to this stressor? What would be the ideal response to this stressor? And that may feel like a really big question. See if you can imagine for yourself how it would look for you to respond to this stressor in the ideal way. And if you can't think of how you would respond to this stressor in an ideal way, you can imagine someone that you admire, even a fictional character, and how that person or character would respond to this scenario in a way that you think of as ideal. And then you ask yourself, if I were responding that way, what is the very first thing I would notice right now? And what is the very first step I would take next? At this point, you're regulated, you're not living in the future, you're living right now. You have all your critical thinking skills and resources online, and now you can decide how to deal with this stressor in a way that makes sense and feels better. Okay, so let's see how this might work in action. Let's say that you have a very real stressor. Say you have this deep fear that you're going to lose your job because you have to take medical leave because you're not feeling well. That is a very real possibility. So this isn't just you making up scary stories for yourself, but you can see how when you're constantly eyes on that potential scary future, it dysregulates you, it stresses you out more, it puts more stress on the bucket, it makes it more likely that you're going to have symptoms, and it makes it impossible for you to address this stressor in a constructive way. So we're going to first notice there's a narrative about what today means. If I don't feel well today, this means I will lose my job. We separate the story from what's happening right now. Speak the truth about your current experience in the moment, in the present moment only. Right now, I feel scared. Right now, I notice anxiety. Right now, I'm noticing symptoms. Right now, I'm noticing grief. Again, just name, label, and then say, I allow. I allow these symptoms. I allow this sadness. I allow the grief. I allow the fear, staying with it as long as you can, noticing how it feels in your body, attuning to yourself, speaking in a caring way toward yourself. It's hard to have this kind of fear. It's hard to have this kind of anxiety. I know the sadness is painful. And then you say to yourself, if I were responding to this stressor in an ideal way, this is what it might look like. I can imagine myself being calm when the symptoms show up. I can imagine myself accepting that they're here, surrendering to the lack of control that you're feeling, finding internal strength to keep moving and to keep being kind to yourself and to keep responding to the other stressors in your life in a constructive way. And then getting really granular about the very first step you take when you feel this way. I don't want to project that on you, but things that I've heard from clients are things like, if I were responding that way, the very first thing that I would notice is I would feel lighter inside and I would get up and go for a walk. And I would breathe and I would work through the day today, knowing that this does not mean anything about my day tomorrow, for example. But how this looks for you may be totally different. I want to wrap up this video by just reassuring you that everyone who has come before you and recovered from chronic dizziness has had terrible, non-negotiable stressors to varying degrees. And none of those things mean that you can't recover. It means that you're going to need to gain more skills in working with the stressors that are filling up your bucket. As always, I hope this video was helpful and actionable to you. If you liked it, please let me know. Leave a question or comment below. You can like this video, share, and of course, please subscribe to my channel. All of these things help me reach more people. I will talk to you soon. Take care, everyone.